No Giannis trade, at least not yet. Jaylen Brown is still on the team, but the NBA draft is this Tuesday, and the Boston Celtics badly need help at two positions: guard and playmaking responsibilities, as well as a center that can stand up to the likes of a Joel Embiid, the likes of a Jokic, or even a Giannis, depending on where he goes. And listen, a Giannis trade is still on the table, but the Celtics have to move forward as if they're not getting them. And it starts this Tuesday. We're going to dive into possible candidates on who the Celtics can draft at both that center position and as a bigger guard to go alongside Derek White, Jayson Tatum. Even if Derek White gets traded in the next couple of seasons, can you develop a guy? Because so far, the Baylor Shireman's, the Ugo Gonzalez's, they're still a little bit away. And the more depth you have, the more you can push those guys to get better and see if you can find a diamond in the rough. But nevertheless, we're going to dive into some of the possible candidates that the Celtics can get at pick 27 in the first round and then at pick 40, starting right now. Welcome in, everybody, to the Your Celtics Source podcast, episode 74. I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, just a couple days before the start of that NBA draft on Tuesday. And I think we can safely say that the Celtics, when it came to the postseason, they were fantastic all regular season. Joe Mazzulla was able to get production from the likes of an Ugo Gonzalez, a Baylor Shireman, a Ron Harper Jr., you name it, those younger, inexperienced, maybe unfinished products that could provide some sort of ball handling or rim protection or playmaking ability in the case of maybe a Ron Harper Jr. and a Baylor Shireman. That was all great in the regular season. But when it came to the postseason, and we saw this with the Spurs, where once De'Aaron Fox was struggling, as great as Dylan Harper was, as great as Stephon Castle was, you can't rely on guys in their first and second years to play valuable playoff minutes, to be the main ball handler. And Joe Mazzulla in that Game 7, without Jayson Tatum, without a key offensive distributor, he had to go to these guys, right? And people are blaming Joe Mazzulla for not playing those guys earlier. I don't really blame him for his rotations. Yes, they were a weird rotation. Yes, it was maybe not the right idea to throw in a bunch of unexperienced guys that had never played in the playoffs up until that point. I understand that. But those guys weren't expecting to play until Jayson Tatum went down. And they probably wouldn't have played if Jayson Tatum went down. Ugo Gonzalez, looked great in those first couple minutes, and then he faded as that game went on, right? Ultimately, Neemias Queta was not up to the task of guarding Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid, understandably, he had one good series, one good week of the entire season, and then he went back to being injured. He was injured going into that series until game 4, 5, and then he was injured in that Knicks series. That's just the life of Joel Embiid, and the Celtics caught them at a just terrible time. That being said, Derek White wasn't really an option because he was such a liability shooting this season. I think he's going to bounce back. I think this was just one bad year. That is something to keep an eye on. The Celtics might trade him in the future. That's for another show. But Derek White wasn't an option to be a playmaker alongside Derek White because teams were leaving Derek White open. Teams weren't afraid of Derek White shooting because he couldn't make a shot. He could not save the day when Jayson Tatum went out. And so Joe Mazzulla had no choice but to try and reduce Derek White's minutes a little bit and rely on some of these younger guys, and it didn't work out. And that's understandable. It's their first, second years in the NBA. But drafting another guard at pick 40 or 27, however it is, right? That's not going to be a top lottery pick by any means. You have to get extremely lucky to get a playable guy in year one. But you're not expecting that. What I'm really hoping the Celtics can get out of a pick 40 or 27, wherever they end up drafting, is a guy that is similar to a Ugo Gonzalez, similar to a Baylor Shireman, but just another guy that can push those guys, right? Because you're not going to get a guy that's better than them, probably. Baylor Shireman's, I think, maybe Ugo Gonzalez, but definitely Baylor Shireman is probably the best out of that group. But if you can get another guy like him, can you push Baylor Shireman to be better on both ends of the floor? Can you get a bigger wing that can push a Jordan Walsh to be better, or even take Jordan Walsh's spot? I'm out on Jordan Walsh, by the way. I think, it's been 3 years now, and rookies have come in and overperformed. He had that one great stretch, sort of November, December area, and then he just completely fell off and was nowhere to be seen. Not really sure what happened there, but I'm out on Jordan Walsh. But in Ugo Gonzalez, right, he looked great. He's going to take another step forward this summer. I fully count on him being in the rotation somehow next season. But who else can you get that can make plays? Who else can provide something extra, something else that can just drive those guys to be better? Because they're going to be more experienced, and that's going to help them next year in the playoffs. But who else is going to be that factor? And I think the best way to go about it, we'll start at the 27th pick, who I think are the best candidates based on some mock drafts that I've been looking at. Who are the best guys to see that we think will end up at around pick 27? I'll go through the guards, then I'll go through the centers, because, right, I just talked about the guard, but the center rotation was another reason why the Celtics lost, and maybe in most guys' opinions, the number one reason why the Celtics lost. Neemias Queta, after having such a great breakout season, was just horrific against Joel Embiid. And even before Joel Embiid came back, he couldn't stay in front of Tyrese Maxey. VJ Edgecombe was shooting threes over the top of him. He was out of rotation. Not even to say that, he was picking up cheap offensive fouls on illegal screens, looking like Karl Anthony Towns for the first part of his career, right? Just all over the place in that series. And someone's got to be able to either, same level as Neemias Queta, but preferably better. And I don't know if you're going to get that. You might have to trade for that. If the Celtics were to get Giannis and he were to play that center rotation, that would solve the issue. But we'll get into that on another date. By the way, whenever Giannis does get traded, because I fully think he's going to get traded in the next 2 days, we're going to go live that day, probably later in the evening as I'm working in the morning, but probably later that evening we're going to go live and react to the trade. If it's on the trade deadline day, we're actually going to be doing a live show for the entire day one of the NBA draft. Should I say NBA draft, not trade deadline, the NBA draft, right? So we'll react to it then. So tune in for whenever Giannis gets traded, which I think will be before the draft. But if it's on draft day, we're also going live for that show. So tune in for that either way. That being said, right, the center rotation has to get better. You have to find a guy, because if we remember last year, Jayson Tatum was so great with Luke Cornett just in the pick and roll. He made Luke Cornett look like one of the best centers in the league just playing alongside Jayson Tatum. And I think Jayson Tatum can do the same. He didn't get a lot of time to play with Queta this season because of the injury to Jayson Tatum. And he's going to get that more experience and the chemistry better next season. But can you get another guy that's better than him, right? I think the defense is going to be okay with whoever you get. You need an offensive center for sure. The rim protection was fine from Queta. I just thought that, he got a little out of place against the 76ers, but you need an offensive player, maybe an offensive, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a guy that shoots threes, because we saw Vucevic wasn't a factor at all. He couldn't do anything despite being able to shoot threes. I actually like a guy like Robert Williams coming back from the Trailblazers. Time Lord, I think that would be a great fit if he was able to stay healthy. Someone along those lines, right? But getting into the picks that the Celtics can go after here, right? And I think starting at pick 27, there's a guy that's more of a wing position, Isaiah Evans, I think, his stock is slipping a little bit, which is why I think he could maybe fall all the way down to 27. Right? He's a great 3-point shooter, elite, people say. I think he is probably one-dimensional offensively. It would take some developing to get him sort of into, that playmaking, ball handling style, but he definitely can be a guy that can knock down threes from the corner, which, the guys of a Baylor Shireman, but more importantly, an Ugo Gonzalez or Jordan Walsh struggled for a lot of the season. Very inconsistent at just knocking down catch and shoot threes from a standstill, let alone moving, right? And I think Isaiah Evans can do a great job of that. He's pretty tall, right, and long frame. That's going to allow him to play well in the defensive end. And we know that the Celtics pride themselves on being a two-way team in the fact that every single player, when everything's going right, can play both sides of the floor. And you're going to need that as Jayson Tatum gets older, as Jaylen Brown gets older, if those two are still together, if they're not together, as Giannis gets older. However, maybe if you get younger picks, right, or picks and a younger player, right, if you get back, let's say, the Murrays from the from the Pelicans, right? If you get like a player like that back for Jaylen Brown, as well as picks and younger players, right? You're still going to need that defensive depth. And I think Isaiah Evans could be a great guy, right? He's right along the Jordan Walsh, Ugo Gonzalez. I think he'd be, right around that group, maybe a little bit better. But like I said, right, it doesn't have to be, if you're not going to get you're not going to get a lottery pick out of this, right? You just need a guy that's around those types of players to push players to get better. That's exactly what you need. You need competition, right? And I think he could be a great specialist shooter off the bench, like a Sam Hauser, especially if they move on from Sam Hauser. Sam Hauser got a little inconsistent as the season went on, and he's making, he's not making a ton, but I think there are guys that you can, make up for Sam Hauser that are on the team already, or that you can find throughout the league or the draft. There are guys that you can, fill into that spot if you were to move on from Sam Hauser and drop that contract somehow. Other guys, this is more of a guard or a wing. Malik Thomas, right? I think he's more of a finished scorer, than Isaiah Evans, right? He can finish around the rim. He can dunk. He's not that, great of a 3-point shooter, but he's a much better shot creator for him and his teammates. He can shoot the mid-range shots. He can play all three positions, 1, 2, 3, so the guards or those forward wing positions if need be, right? I think he can be a great scorer, right? I think the league is moving back away from that 3-point era. Steph Curry brought that 3-point era in, and we see, guys like a Dylan Harper, even a Wemby to an extent, right? And Wemby's an alien, but, I think more guys like, SGA, even Luka sometimes, right? Jalen Brunson, right? Guys that are living Anthony Edwards, right? All these guys can shoot threes, but they love this mid-range area. They love being in the paint, whether it's at the rim or in that 15 to 16-foot range. The league's moving back to that range. And the Celtics, quite frankly, don't have anybody besides Jaylen Brown that even attempts to try those shots, right? Jayson Tatum a little bit, but you need more of those guys that are capable of making tough shots, contested shots from closer range, right? And I think, a Malik Thomas could be that exact guy that you need. He's more like a Ayo Dosunmu from the Bulls, right? That kind of player, right? And I think he could be a versatile rotation piece if need be. Couple more. I think one more like guard forwardish position, more of a forward, Joshua Jefferson, right? I think he could be that front court depth, sort of a, not a direct substitute for Jayson Tatum, but he's a strong rebounder. He's a good passer. He can play defense as well, right? That's the exact spot that you want a guy like that, because Jayson Tatum's going to need to take breaks, and can you play a guy that, can go alongside? You're going to have the veterans. You're going to have a Derek White. You're going to have have guys around him, right? He's not going to be the main offensive guy, but can you get a guy like that that can come in and play a certain role and thrive in that? That's exactly what you're looking for from a Joshua Jefferson, maybe somewhere in between, obviously he's not Dwight Powell, but he's, I think a guy that plays a similar style as him, right? Very, very much a glue guy that you could use. Moving on to centers that the Celtics could draft at that pick 27, right? And I think the Celtics are probably going to prioritize centers over guards if a center comes up. Obviously, if a great guard drops, they'll go for that. But my guess is the center is the more important position, especially because you have Jayson Tatum, who's going to play a guard-like role on the team, obviously. And I think this is a great year where Jayson Tatum can average close to a triple-double. He can lower that scoring a little bit, but become just an all-around top 5 NBA player, top 3 MVP type player. Centers, though, right? I don't know if you want a specific shooter per se, right? I don't know if you want, a specific guy that can shoot threes, but I definitely think that you want a guy that can be a presence at the rim. And maybe this is a guy that will drop all the way to 40, and maybe you can get them there. But maybe a guy like I'm trying to think, like an Isaiah Nelson. He's a good center option, rim protection, interior defense as well, right? All these guys, and obviously you still have Williams down in the G League, right, that you can continue to develop as well, right? So you have a lot of good guys that are in the G League, and you have Keita, and you have, they'll probably get rid of Luka Garza, but you really don't, it's really thin right now at this center rotation. We knew that coming into this season, right? They never really tried to improve to get a center, right? That was part of their cap, or should I say their salary cutting expenses and everything. They made the mistake ultimately of trading for Vucevic. They should have kept Simons. Maybe they'll get Simons back. That's an option. We'll see. Although the Bulls are, they're low on guards now, so we'll see. I think Simons could be a great guy to get back. But that being said, right, another center that you can get, Ugonna Unoha, I think is how you pronounce it. I think if they don't draft a big in round 1, he's definitely a guy that will go round 2 at pick 40. He's a rim protector. He's an older prospect, right? Which usually means that, they have a little bit more experience playing at not a professional level, but a competitive level, whether it's in college or in Europe or wherever they're playing, right? So these are all great guys that will have a little bit more experience, right? I think he would be more of an insurance guy, not necessarily a starter or even a backup to Keita, but he would definitely be more of that insurance guy that never hurts to have. There are a couple guards and stuff that you can pick at pick 40 as well. I think maybe a guy like Braden Smith, he could develop into that long-term backup point guard, right? He's never going to be a stud or anything like that is my best guess on him, right? I've only seen a couple of these plays. I went in and looked at their highlights from college in Europe. There's not much of them, but you definitely see potential in a way that they can fit into this Celtics rotation. He's definitely an NBA-ready passer as well, Braden Smith is. I think he could be that high floor guy. Right? He's going to have a mid to low ceiling, but he's definitely a high floor guy, brings that IQ, which is something that, Celtics badly need. Other than that, probably one more guy, Reggie Saunders. He's more of that guard or wing that you could get at pick 40. He's elite shooting. He is coming off of a torn ACL, if I believe. I think it was an ACL, right? So that is something you'd have to manage. He'd be a developmental guy, a long-term sort of direction that you would head with him. But he's mature, and he could be a good guy that you could fit into Boston's system. And he'll be cheap. He'll be a cheap depth guy, right? And he can sort of replace any wing production sort of by a committee, right? He's not going to do it all alone, but he can be part of the backup wing rotation, which no team has enough wings. You could always use more wings, right? And I put a Baylor Shireman, a Jordan Walsh, and Ugo Gonzalez, all those guys into that wing position. Every one of those is going to have a game, a month, a couple of games, however it is, where they're the reason that you're winning games, right? And it's not going to be one guy. And unfortunately, I think that was one of the things that hurt the Celtics in the playoffs is they didn't have one guy to go to. Joe Mazzulla was still trying to fiddle around with lineups and rotations. But throughout the regular season, which the Celtics, I will admit, have conquered the regular season, right? Regular season is not a problem. It's about how can you get past these last couple of seasons with a roster like this in the playoffs, right? The regular season is not a problem. But can you find a way to, throughout the course of the regular season, find a one guy after playing multiple guys, after seeing how rotations work? Can you find one guy, whether it's these draft picks, whether it's an Hugo Gonzalez, whether it's a Bill Sharman, whoever it may be, can you find one guy that you can, use full time in the playoffs that can be, that eighth guy off the bench and be a absolute necessity in the playoffs? That's just how it has to be, because you see the Knicks won off of their depth, playing a Mitchell Robinson 20 minutes a night, playing, a Landry Shamet who could knock down a three and could not miss, right? Getting just tons of productions. And we've talked about this before. I talked about it a lot last podcast, but I'll just sort of reiterate it. The Knicks, they played around Jalen Brunson. They got Karl Anthony Towns to get his ego out of the way, and instead of wanting to be that number one option, he took that backseat role, and from there on out, the Knicks took off and never looked back. The Celtics have to do the same thing, and I don't know if you can do it with both Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum. My best guess is not, but you can't do it with Jaylen Brown or with Jayson Tatum and Giannis either. I don't think that's the way to go at all. I think you have to trade Brown for younger talent that you can develop that are going to be all-stars. You have to find guys like a Dylan Harper, like a Stephon Castle. And obviously, the league has now changed so that you can't draft top 5 multiple years like that. Because of the Spurs, they've changed the rules. But there's still already in the league players that you can trade for already, massive talents, whether it be the Pelicans, the Hawks, the Trailblazers. There are lots of great guys that you can get to play alongside Jayson Tatum, but be a secondary scorer. Anthony Simons could be a great guy. I think he did a great job when he was here of turning from a player that could not play a lick of defense, that was abysmal on that side of the floor, to be a playable defender, right? He was never going to be an elite defender. You can't be an elite defender at 6'2" or smaller, especially a player that's never, has been a average defender in his life at best. But he became playable around the system, and I think the Celtics do a great job of getting guys to play great defense. The defense is never the problem for this team. It's the offense that comes and goes. I think that's what has hurt the Celtics in the past. And Ime Udoka transformed this defense when he was here. Joe Mazzulla came in and took that defense and transformed the offense. Yes, they got some great talent, some All-NBA, some Hall of Famers, but Joe Mazzulla transformed the offense of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And now the offense has started to dip a little bit. The defense is still there, but the offense has come and gone over the last couple of years. And it starts with the three-point shooting. Yes, I think the Celtics are going to do a lot more in the paint offense next season. There's going to be a lot more of one guy penetrating the paint, and whether they're kicking it out or not, they still need to get into the paint, get cuts off ball from an Hugo Gonzalez, from a Baylor Scheinman. It's going to start with those guys, and I think they're going to do a lot better job of doing that this next season. They have to, because the league, like I said, is changing. It's going away from that three-point shot and back towards that mid-range in the paint, more physical play. We saw how physical those playoffs were, more, I think, than the last 10 years, right? All the pushing and shoving and, the flagrant fouls and the non-flagrant fouls called, but everybody talking about it. All of that throughout the playoffs. That's just how it's going to be. And I like it like that. I think it's better for the league. I think it helps to eliminate offensive players that are just flopping, that are just trying to sell every call. And there's still going to be some of that in the regular season. But you have to prepare for the playoffs. Like I said, this team has already conquered the regular season. Can you prepare all regular season? And there's going to be less tankers too, right? You're not going to be able to go against a third of the league that's trying to lose. Everybody's going to be in contention, especially with the new lottery rules. So it's going to be a much tougher regular season. The Celtics have to get ready now. It starts with the draft, a center, a wing. We'll see what happens with Giannis. Like I said, we'll go live whenever Giannis gets traded. We'll go live for the entire, hour and a half to 2 hours of the first round of the NBA draft on Tuesday night. So tune in for that. And with that being said, it starts Tuesday. The Celtics, they need a center and some playmaking. And until next time, go Celtics.